Derek discovered him on the side of the road in the biting cold, a tiny German shepherd puppy, vulnerable and trembling, abandoned and alone. Moved by compassion, he took the creature in and devoted himself entirely to nursing it back to health, forging a bond between them that seemed unbreakable. Yet, as the days and weeks passed, a persistent unease began to settle in his heart. On one fateful stormy night, a long-held secret was finally revealed. The animal he had poured so much care into was not a dog at all. What exactly was it? And what consequences would arise once the authorities discovered the truth? Before we dive into the full story, please share in the comments where you're watching from today. And if this story captivates you, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Derek gripped the steering wheel so tightly, his knuckles turned white as he navigated his truck through the fury of a relentless storm. After nearly 24 hours of non-stop emergency calls, exhaustion weighed heavily on him, and the constant drone of the windshield wipers nearly lulled him into a trance. The rain hammered against the glass like a shower of bullets, transforming the dark road ahead into a blur of indistinct shadows and fleeting flashes of light. As he neared home muttering quietly about his fatigue, he slowed for a familiar curve on Highway 16. Normally, this long, deserted stretch offered a moment of relaxation, but tonight, the raging weather demanded his full attention. As his headlights swept across the wet, slick asphalt, something unusual caught his eye. A small, dark shape lying on the shoulder of the road. Derek squinted, his 15 years as a rescue worker compelling him to investigate the strange figure immediately. Despite his weariness, he gently tapped the brakes and pulled his truck onto the gravel verge. For a brief moment, he sat there, listening to the rhythmic drumming of the rain on the roof. Part of him wanted to just drive on, reasoning it was likely just debris washed up by the storm, but his intuition told him otherwise. Trusting his years of experience, Derek grabbed his flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the downpour. The deluge soaked him instantly, but he barely noticed as he approached the mysterious shape. As the beam of his flashlight cut through the impenetrable darkness, his heart sank. There, huddled in a sad, small mound, lay a creature that seemed far too thin and drenched to be a normal puppy. It looked more like a soaked rodent than a young dog. As he crouched down, the animal timidly lifted its head and let out a whimper so faint and fragile that Derek had never heard anything like it. "Hey, little guy," he whispered tenderly, already shrugging off his jacket. "Let's get you somewhere warm." Draping his jacket over the trembling animal, he cradled it against his chest. The creature, likely too weak to react, offered no resistance. Soon, it was safely tucked away in the cab of his truck. Once inside, Derek cranked up the heater. He could feel the animal's rapid heartbeat through his palm as he held it close, his other hand guiding the truck steadily. "You're going to be okay," he murmured, glancing down at the bundled form on his lap. "First thing tomorrow morning, we'll get you to the vet. Clinic opens at 8. I know because my buddy Jamal is always grumbling about the morning rush." Without delay, Derek carried the small animal straight to his bathroom, grabbed the softest towel he owned, and began to gently dry its fragile body. Beneath the matted fur, he realized the creature was practically skeletal, a frailness that made his stomach turn. Though its eyes were barely open, a glimmer of warm brown shone through. Quickly, but carefully, Derek spread a few old blankets near the heater in the living room, creating a cozy nest for his new friend. He placed the animal right in the center, and it immediately curled into a tight ball, trembling slightly even though it was now dry. Settling onto the sofa, Derek couldn't take his eyes off the little figure. Who could have left it out here? Was a frantic family searching for it in the middle of the storm? He made a mental note to check the local lost and found posts in the morning, but for now, exhaustion overtook him, and his eyes slowly drifted shut. He had barely begun to doze when a peculiar sound broke the silence. A thin, high-pitched chirp came from the makeshift bed. It sounded as if a tiny bird had begun to sing, though dawn was still hours away. Startled from his light sleep, his neck stiff from dozing uncomfortably on the couch, Derek couldn't remember why he wasn't in his own bed. Then the sound came again, accompanied by a soft scratching and rustling near the heater. The storm had finally passed, leaving a peaceful calm in its wake, broken only by the steady dripping from the gutters. Rubbing his eyes, Derek sat up and looked toward the improvised nest. The little animal was now awake. Its body moved in curious, almost feline stretches, not the typical movements of a dog. "Hey there," he greeted it softly, careful not to frighten it. He slowly made his way to the kitchen and returned with a small bowl of water and a few pieces of shredded turkey he'd rescued from the fridge. He placed the bowl and the scraps near the blanket and watched as the animal sniffed the new aromas with its twitching nose. After a hesitant sniff, it turned its head away, showing no interest. Worried, Derek murmured, "You need to get something in your stomach, little fella." He dipped a finger into the water and gently offered it to the small creature. This time, the response was immediate. The animal eagerly licked the tip of his finger, its pale pink tongue darting out to savor every drop. In that moment, as Derek's eyes met the creature's huge, dark, and almost unnervingly intelligent gaze, he froze. There was something peculiar in the way it stared at him, an intensity that was both alien and strangely unsettling. Sleep was now impossible. Derek picked up his phone, settled back onto the couch, as the animal tracked his every move, and began searching the internet for tips on caring for an abandoned puppy. He typed in phrases like, "how to care for a stray puppy," "what to feed a young canine," and signs of dehydration in pups. Page after page of advice appeared, some helpful, some contradictory. A soft rustling drew his attention again. The little creature was trying to stand, still wobbly, but showing a strength that belied its apparent frailty. Its paws, unusually long and delicate, stretched out as it let out another sharp, high-pitched sound that filled the room. Derek frowned and put down his phone. That sound wasn't the familiar yip of a puppy, but something that more closely resembled the chirp of a bird. The next morning, as light streamed into the living room, Derek woke to find that the animal he had begun to care for was alive and moving about the room. Its nose twitched as it explored every corner, its unsteady steps suggesting a newfound energy. Amused, Derek watched as the little thing discovered a discarded pen cap and pounced on it with unexpected agility. "Feeling better, are we?" he commented softly. In the kitchen, Derek cracked eggs into a sizzling skillet, preparing his own breakfast and setting aside a small portion for his tiny guest. The enticing aroma of freshly cooked eggs immediately caught the animal's attention. Its large ears swiveled toward the sound, and when Derek placed a small plate of scrambled eggs on the floor, it approached cautiously. After a hesitant sniff, instead of devouring the food from the plate, it grabbed small morsels with its mouth and scurried away to hide them behind the trash can and under the kitchen cabinets. "Well, that's odd," Derek muttered, watching the unusual behavior with growing curiosity. After breakfast, The animal continued to explore the house with increasing confidence, moving from room to room. Derek noticed that it deliberately ignored the plush dog bed he had placed near the heater, opting instead for a nook under the sofa, where it curled into a tight ball with its bushy tail wrapped protectively around its body. From this hideout, it watched Derek with bright, intelligent eyes. Noticing how its reddish fur began to catch the morning light, Derek smiled and said, "I think I'll call you Rex." The little creature's large ears twitched in response, but it remained silent, continuing to observe him from its corner. Later, Derek grabbed his keys and wallet and headed out for a quick trip to the local pet store, leaving Rex safely at home. There, he stocked up on essentials: premium puppy food, a few chew toys, a small blue collar, and a lightweight leash. At the checkout, the clerk looked at the photos Derek showed her and commented that she had never seen a puppy quite like it. Back home, Derek sat cross-legged on the floor and dangled one of the new toys, a soft blue ball with a bell inside, in front of Rex. The fox-like creature emerged cautiously from under the sofa, but instead of immediately chasing the ball, it pounced on it, shaking it vigorously as if trying to tear it apart. Then, to Derek's amusement, it pushed the ball until it rolled under the sofa, joining a growing collection of hidden treasures. "You really are a strange little creature," Derek said, with an affectionate laugh, as he watched Rex's tail disappear under the sofa again. Later, under the warm midday sun, Derek carefully guided Rex toward his truck. The lively little animal wriggled in his arms like a coiled spring as he gently placed it on the passenger seat. The moment Rex was settled, he began to explore the cab's interior, moving with surprising grace and agility. "Settle down, boy," Derek laughed, trying to wrap a blanket around his restless companion. But Rex deftly dodged him, darting across the center console with feline quickness. "You're quite the wild soul, aren't you?" he teased. At the veterinary clinic that afternoon, the lobby smelled of antiseptic and pet shampoo. Dr. Raish, a kind and gentle veterinarian with warm eyes and hair always pulled back neatly, greeted them with a smile and led them to an examination room. "Let's have a look at this little fellow," she said, lifting Rex onto the cool metal examination table. She carefully checked his teeth, eyes, and limbs. "These teeth are surprisingly sharp," she observed, "and his legs are quite long for a typical shepherd mix." She glanced at Derek. "How has he been behaving? Does he bark?" Derek shook his head. "Actually, he makes these strange chirping sounds, and he eats in a very peculiar way, even hides his food all over the house." Dr. Raish raised an eyebrow with interest. "His behavior is certainly unique. We could run a genetic test if you want to be sure." Derek just shrugged, scratching Rex behind the ears. "He's just a mutt. Whatever he is, it doesn't make a difference to me." Relieved by Rex's clean bill of health, Derek returned home. In the living room, he watched as his new, peculiar companion settled in. Rex darted across the floor in a fluid motion, then scaled the back of the sofa, landing like a cat on the narrow ledge of the windowsill. "You're a strange one, Rex, but you're mine now," Derek said fondly. Rex responded with a sharp chirp, his bright eyes fixed on Derek, as if he understood every word. That night, as Derek prepared for bed, the soft chirping from Rex's makeshift resting spot lulled him to sleep. The next morning, as golden rays of sun painted the living room floor, Derek woke up with a stiff neck but a warm heart as he saw Rex curled up on the corner of the sofa. His reddish fur caught the morning light as the little glove-pawed animal lay with his tail wrapped tightly around his body, like a small fox. Derek couldn't help but smile, realizing just how empty his house had been before the arrival of this unusual companion. Throughout the morning, Derek introduced Rex to every corner of his home. He set up a proper feeding station in the kitchen, with matching bowls for food and water, but Rex remained fascinated by every other nook and cranny. He darted back and forth, his nose constantly twitching as he explored each new scent. He peeked from behind the bookshelf, zipped under the television, and even tried to scramble up the living room curtains with surprising skill. "Hey, no climbing?" Derek called out, catching Rex mid-ascent. Afterward, he tried to entertain Rex with the various toys he had bought at the pet store. He rolled a squeaky ball across the floor, but Rex only watched it, tilting his head in clear confusion. However, when offered a stuffed rabbit, Rex's entire demeanor changed completely. He pounced on the toy with surprising precision, shaking it vigorously as if it were real prey. Later, Derek decided it was time for their first walk around the block. Clipping on the leash proved to be a challenge, as Rex squirmed and twisted, clearly uncomfortable with the restraint. Outside, instead of walking obediently by Derek's side like most dogs, Rex forged ahead, his nose to the ground, moving in quick, determined steps, more like he was tracking quarry than enjoying a leisurely stroll. "What kind of dog is that?" a neighbor exclaimed, eyeing Rex's unusual markings. "He's a rescue," Derek replied. When Rex's ears perked at some distant sound, it was clear he remained an enigma to everyone, including Derek himself. That evening, as Derek prepared dinner in the kitchen, he noticed that despite his efforts to keep Rex off the counters, the little animal had chosen a spot near the microwave as his personal watchtower. From there, he observed Derek's every move with intense concentration, especially whenever food was involved. "You're a strange one, Rex," Derek mused. Rex replied with his characteristic chirp, his bright eyes fixed on Derek's hands as he prepared the meal. The next morning, in the cool air, Derek packed his bag for his shift at the fire station. As he glanced back, he saw Rex watching him intently from the kitchen counter. The thought of leaving his unusual companion alone for an entire day tugged at his heart. "What do you say, buddy? Want to come to work with me?" he asked. Rex tilted his head, his luminous eyes fixed on Derek's face for a long moment. After a brief hesitation, Derek grabbed a new blanket he had recently bought for Rex and climbed into his truck, the little animal trotting right behind him. At the fire station, Derek's arrival with Rex caused quite a stir. His colleagues crowded around, a mixture of curiosity and amusement on their faces as they examined the small creature that was supposed to be a puppy. Jamal, Derek's best friend, crossed his arms and grinned. "Looks more like something from the woods. You sure you didn't rescue a coyote pup?" Derek rolled his eyes and replied, "He's just different." Throughout the day, Rex proved to be a true explorer, slipping silently through the station and appearing in the most unexpected places. The crew would often find him curled up on a pile of gear or hiding in a half-open locker. His movements were so quiet that several times, someone would be startled to turn around and find Rex watching them with a fixed gaze. During lunch, Rex demonstrated his cunning by refusing the usual treats offered by the team, yet still managing to snatch small pieces of sandwiches when no one was looking. Derek finally caught him in the act, as the animal was stashing his little conquests behind the sofa in the break room. The real challenge, however, came when Spark, the station's beloved dalmatian, ambled over to investigate the newcomer. As the larger dog approached, Rex's demeanor changed in an instant. His fur bristled, and he let out a low, guttural chirp that froze everyone in place. Spark stopped short, his tail dropping in confusion, and slowly backed away. Derek watched the scene with growing apprehension, making a mental note of Rex's obvious discomfort around other dogs. As night fell and the crew settled down, Derek made a small bed for Rex next to his bunk, using a soft blanket from home. He drifted off to sleep, only to be awakened in the dark hours by the feeling of the bed being empty. In the gloom, his eyes finally found Rex's silhouette, perched motionless on the windowsill, staring out into the night. "You really are something else, aren't you?" Derek murmured into the silence. Rex turned his head, his eyes catching the faint light and glinting like tiny moons. Then a soft, enigmatic howl broke the silence, a sound that echoed strangely through the quiet station. The next morning at the station, the familiar sounds of fresh coffee brewing, a crackling radio, and boots on concrete filled the air as the firefighters prepared for the day. Derek yawned and stretched as he left the bunk room, but he quickly realized Rex wasn't in his usual spot. "Anyone seen Rex?" he called out, trying to hide the worry in his voice. Silence. His heart began to pound. He checked behind the sofa, under the bunks, even in the locker room. After 15 anxious minutes of searching, he finally spotted a flash of reddish fur in the engine compartment, tucked away amongst some old rags, a tiny snout tucked under its tail. "There you are," Derek sighed in relief, letting out a small laugh. "You really had me worried, buddy." One of his colleagues remarked, "I've never seen a dog hide like that before." Back home, Derek began to notice more peculiar habits. The kibble bowl he'd bought remained untouched, yet small pieces of food would be mysteriously found in unusual places, stashed behind the sofa, wrapped in blankets, or even tucked between the couch cushions. During the day, Rex would seek out the darkest corners to sleep, but as dusk fell, he would become a blur of activity, racing through the house with surprising energy. His awareness was almost hyperactive. Every subtle noise, from the hum of the refrigerator to the distant call of a bird, made his ears twitch like tiny satellite dishes. One evening, Jamal came to visit and watched as Rex bounded from shadow to shadow with an unmistakable, cat-like grace. "You sure you didn't rescue a raccoon?" he joked. Derek forced a laugh, but Jamal's words echoed in his mind. Maybe it was time to take Rex back to the vet for a more thorough checkup. Later that night, Derek decided to try some basic training. Standing in the living room with a handful of treats, he commanded firmly, "Sit!" while holding one up. Rex stared at him with bright eyes, but made no move to obey. "Come on, buddy, sit!" Derek insisted. Rex tilted his head, then suddenly darted across the room, playfully dodging the furniture. After several failed attempts at stay and come, Derek sank onto the sofa, exasperated. It was then that he felt a soft weight beside him. Rex had hopped up and curled against his leg, letting out a soft, reassuring chirp as if to comfort him. Over the following week, Derek started observing Rex's behavior more closely. At first, the changes were subtle. The color of his fur deepened, taking on a richer, more vibrant reddish hue. His clumsy, puppy-like build was gradually giving way to a sleek, graceful frame, and his movements flowed with an almost feral precision. "You're growing up so well, buddy," Derek murmured one morning, running a hand down Rex's back. Even his fur had become denser, with a strangely unique texture he couldn't quite place. His paws now seemed more slender and agile, and when he moved, he no longer bounded with a puppy's clumsy gait, but with a calculated, almost predatory grace. Derek tried to convince himself these were just normal developmental changes, but a seed of doubt had been planted. During a quiet shift at the station, Derek settled at a computer in the break room, scrolling through endless pages of dog breeds, pictures of German shepherds, huskies, and various mixes. He was searching for a combination that could explain Rex's unique characteristics: his nocturnal behavior, his independence, the chirping sounds, the unusual eating habits, and the aversion to other dogs. Just then, Jamal walked in with a steaming mug of coffee and glanced over Derek's shoulder. "Still trying to figure out what kind of mutt you've got there," Jamal teased. "Maybe he's actually a fox in disguise." Derek laughed, but something about the comment stuck with him. After Jamal left, Derek hesitated for a moment before typing "fox behavior" into the search bar. As he read article after article describing nocturnal activity, the habit of burying food, the chirping sounds, referred to as geckering, and a solitary nature with an aversion to other dogs, each detail chipped away at what he thought he knew, leaving him to question Rex's true identity. That night, wanting to clear his head, Derek clipped the leash on Rex and went for a late-night walk through the quiet, lamplit streets. Rex moved beside him without a sound. His movements no longer seemed like those of a simple puppy. Each step was deliberate, almost stealthy. As they neared a local park, Rex suddenly tensed and pulled on the leash, trying to lead Derek into the darker, unlit areas. An uneasy feeling settled in Derek's stomach, and he tightened his grip. Rex stopped, turned his head under the artificial light, and let out a chirp that echoed hauntingly in the night. A sound that was wild, unsettling, and utterly non-canine. Back in his kitchen, sitting at the table with a warm mug of coffee, Derek stared at his laptop screen, filled with open tabs. Red fox behavior, keeping foxes as pets, fox vocalizations, and fox dens. Rex, curled on the windowsill with his tail wrapped around his small body, was bathed in the soft morning light, which highlighted the auburn coat that had emerged over the past few weeks. His coffee grew cold as Derek read, comparing the behaviors of foxes to Rex's quirks. Every detail, the way Rex hoarded his food, his complete indifference to other dogs, and that strange, high-pitched chirp, fit the descriptions of fox behavior with frightening accuracy. Later that day, Derek found himself back at Dr. Reyes's veterinary clinic. The familiar antiseptic smell filled the exam room as he shifted nervously. "I know this is going to sound crazy," he began, looking at the veterinarian. "But is there any chance at all, that Rex is part fox?" Dr. Reyes laughed at first, but her smile faded as she examined Rex more closely. She ran her hands gently over his elongated legs and studied his sharp features. "You know, his proportions are quite unusual for a typical dog. The way he moves, it's more like a predator than a pet." Adjusting her glasses, she added, "We could run a DNA test if you want to be sure." Derek's stomach tightened at the suggestion. Did he really want confirmation that the once absurd possibility was now terrifyingly real? That night, sitting on his back porch, Derek silently watched Rex as his mind raced. An owl hooted in the distance, and Rex's ears instantly swiveled toward the sound, his body tensing. When rustling leaves stirred in the garden, Rex dropped into a low crouch that was nothing like a playful puppy's. Derek pulled out his phone and navigated to an online pet supply store, hesitating for only a moment before adding a DNA test kit to his cart. "It's just for peace of mind," he told himself, as he clicked buy. But as he watched Rex, a sleek shape slipping along the porch railing, an unsettling certainty washed over him. He was only confirming what he had already begun to suspect. Silence reigned in the living room. broken only by the steady tick-tock of the wall clock and the occasional creak of settling wood. Derek was dozing on his worn leather sofa, an arm draped over his eyes, while Rex lay curled at his feet. The scene was idyllic until, suddenly, Rex's head shot up. His entire body went rigid, ears swiveling forward like radar dishes. Focused on something beyond the window that Derek couldn't see, Rex shot across the room in a flash of red fur. "Rex!" Derek called, his voice thick with sleep. But before he could even sit up properly, Rex was at the window. His nose pressed against a small crack left open for fresh air. He squeezed his slender body through the opening and vanished into the darkness. "No!" Derek stumbled to his feet, nearly tripping over the coffee table in his desperate rush. Grabbing a flashlight, he bolted outside, his heart hammering as the beam cut through the backyard. "Rex, come back!" he yelled into the quiet neighborhood. But only the rustling of leaves answered him. He searched frantically through the bushes, under porches, in every shadow the light could reach. But there was no sign of the distinctive red fur or the glimmering eyes he was so desperate to find. As the hours wore on, his voice grew hoarse, and his legs ached from searching. Finally, as midnight bled into the early hours of the morning, an exhausted Derek returned home, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He left the back porch light on and sank into his armchair, his red-rimmed eyes fixed on the door. Just before dawn, as the sky slowly shifted from deep black to a soft, bruised blue, he heard a faint scratching at the back door. His heart leaped as he ran to the door, finding Rex with his fur slightly damp from the morning dew, his eyes gleaming with an enigmatic, unreadable expression fixed on his face. Without a sound, Rex padded silently inside, leaving a trail of tiny, wet paw prints on the floor. With a trembling sigh of relief, Derek closed the door behind them. Later that morning, as Derek settled at his desk, an unread email caught his eye. The subject line read, "DNA test results, sample 2847. His hand trembled as it hovered over the message before he finally clicked. Across the room, Rex was resting in a patch of sun, his red coat almost glowing. Taking a deep breath, Derek read the results. The charts and percentages confirmed what his heart had long suspected. Rex was 100% vulpes vulpes, a true red fox. Not a dog, not even part canine, but a genuinely wild animal. In shock, Derek leaned back, running his hands through his hair as the room suddenly felt oppressive. He glanced at Rex, who chose that moment to yawn and stretch, completely oblivious to the magnitude of the revelation. You're actually a fox," Derek whispered. The word felt foreign on his tongue, as if spoken in another language. With trembling fingers, Derek began searching the internet for information on keeping a fox as a pet. Each new page brought more sobering news: strict laws, severe penalties, possible prison sentences, and most alarmingly, the immediate seizure of the wild animal. His throat tightened as he read accounts of authorities confiscating exotic pets, rehoming them to sanctuaries, or in some cases, euthanizing them if they were deemed too domesticated to survive in the wild. Amid his frantic research, the soft sound of quiet paws drew his attention. Rex had moved to his usual spot beside the sofa, curled up with his tail wrapped tightly around his body. His eyes, though calm, were fixed intently on Derek, as always. In that instant, it all clicked into place. The chirping instead of barking, the cat-like movements, the aversion to other dogs, the nocturnal activity. They weren't just quirks, they were the natural behaviors of a fox. Derek realized he had been so captivated by the idea of saving a helpless pup that he had ignored the creature's true, wild nature, a being meant to live free in the forest, among its own kind. Rex let out his soft, familiar chirp, the same sound that had won Derek's heart on that stormy night. The thought of never hearing that sound again made his chest ache. He knew he would soon have to make a decision that would change both of their lives forever. During a break at the fire station the next day, Derek hunched over his phone, scrolling through endless pages of exotic animal regulations. His coffee sat beside him, cold and forgotten. He kept running a hand through his hair, in growing frustration, as he read the unforgiving laws. Foxes could not be kept as pets. No exceptions. Yet, he couldn't imagine life without Rex, not after everything they had been through. In a last, desperate act, he dialed another number, this time for a wildlife sanctuary in the neighboring state. The conversation followed a familiar pattern. "I understand your attachment," the director explained gently. "But foxes are not meant to be kept in a house. Our facilities are excellent." Before she could continue, Derek ended the call. He had already contacted 6 agencies, 3 legal advisors, and 2 rehabilitation centers that morning. The answer was always the same. Rex had to be surrendered. Later, as he finished his last call, Jamal appeared in the break room. Crossing his arms, he said, "You look like you're about to throw that phone through a wall." "I've tried everything," Derek said, his voice tight. "No one wants to help me keep him." After a short silence, Jamal asked, "What about special permits? I know a guy who got to keep a rescued falcon because it couldn't be released back into the wild. They got him a permit to keep it for educational purposes." Derek's eyes lit up with a spark of hope. Special permits for animals that wouldn't survive in the wild. He scrambled for his phone. "If I can prove Rex can't make it out there." Without hesitation, he began scrolling through his photo gallery, reviewing videos of Rex's most peculiar behaviors, clips of the fox trying to sleep in the dryer, stealing socks, and even chirping at the television. He had compiled dozens of recordings that demonstrated just how domesticated Rex had become. "Jamal, you're a genius," he exclaimed, already drafting an email to the veterinarian, requesting an official statement on Rex's degree of domestication. For the next hour, he meticulously gathered evidence, videos of Rex's failed attempts to hunt even the slowest insects, photos of him hiding his food in secret corners of the house, and written testimonies from his fellow firefighters about Rex's unusual antics at the station. That evening, as Derek sat on the living room floor, he watched Rex chase a moth that had flown inside. He admired the fox's graceful, predatory movements, a clear reminder of his wild origins. But when the moth finally escaped through an open window, Rex simply trotted back to him, curled up snugly against his leg, and let out a soft chirp. Derek reached down to stroke Rex's ears, feeling the soft fur beneath his fingers. "You belong with me, Rex," he murmured, "and I'm going to fight to keep you." At dawn the next day, the air crisp and cool, Derek led Rex along their usual route. The little fox trotted faithfully by his side, his red coat shimmering in the first rays of sun. But that day, something felt different. As they passed, their neighbor, Mrs. Rivera, was in her garden. Her usual warm greeting was replaced by a stern, suspicious gaze fixed on Rex. Alarmed, Derek quickened his pace, tugging gently on the leash. A jogger slowed to a halt to get a second look. "What kind of dog is that?" the man asked, frowning. "Oh, he's just a rescue," Derek mumbled, already turning back toward his house. Later, at the fire station, Jamal pulled Derek aside near the lockers. His normally cheerful face was lined with worry. "People are talking, man," Jamal said in a low voice. "Mrs. Rivera said she saw you with that fox, and Carlos was even joking about calling animal control." A knot of dread tightened in Derek's stomach. He gripped the edge of his locker so hard, his knuckles turned white. "If someone reports Rex before I can get that special permit, they'll just take him. No questions asked," he muttered, more to himself than to Jamal. Jamal nodded grimly. "You should probably lay low for a while." That night, as Derek watched Rex from the window, the little fox stood with his front paws on the sill, ears pricked and nose twitching in the cool night air. Derek made a decision. No more walks, no more visits to the station. "Not until I get this permit," he declared firmly. Rex noticed the change immediately. He moved from window to window, letting out soft, questioning chirps. He even scratched at the door, looking back at Derek with a confused gaze. It broke Derek's heart to see that look, but he knew that as unfair as it was to both of them, he couldn't risk losing his companion. When darkness fell, he checked every door and window before he went to bed. And so, through challenges, tears, and a relentless fight to keep his friend, Derek and Rex carried on. After many trials and a long journey of love, determination, and the pursuit of a special permit, they finally found a way to be together, even if it meant living on the edge of what the law allowed. If you enjoyed this story of Derek and Rex, prepare for another equally captivating tale. Click here to watch the next adventure.